Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanaka Oberhuber, and I'm your host. My guest today is Robert Wolf. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I would like to start with a question where you can take your time to answer it. How did you come to see the world the way you do today?
Well, your first 10 years of life, you're just a kid just trying to get by, so that you're influenced by so many things, it's so hard to remember. Then you become a teenager, and I guess there's a little narcissism with that. You think you're undefeatable. It's just you think you're going to live forever. You think you just say you're over the top of the world, and you kind of have that, I don't know, in the next 10, 15 years. And for me, growing up, my dad was a doctor, and he was a hero to me. He was my role model. So I never really wanted to do anything in life except become a doctor myself, which I am. He was an OBGYN. I'm a radiologist. And pretty much the next 30, 35 years, I practiced medicine and was with family and had plenty of things to do, plenty of hobbies and leisure and interests. But now in the last 7 years or so, I've come to take the history of the Holocaust and genocide a lot more seriously after reading my dad's autobiography that he wrote in the 70s. And I converted into a biography in 2018. We rolled it over a few times. I have a co-author that did a great job helping me write the book, and we've turned it into a really fine novel. And so Not a Real Enemy describes my dad's life, not only under communist Hungary, but also not only under Nazi Hungary, but also under communist Hungary. And he was a 4-time escape artist. There's 20 miracles in the book. And I probably should have written this book, 20, 30 years ago when I first read the manuscript of his autobiography. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I was busy with radiology and medicine and practice and just trying to earn a living and get by. But I really took it seriously after my mom died. Dad died in 97, unfortunately, mom in 2016. And then a historian friend of ours in Michigan handed me the disc. My dad's story from the 70s went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disc. So she says, you got to read that. And I didn't really have time for another year. This is now 2017 into 2018. I didn't have any time. I was taking care of mom's affairs, decided to retire, went back to work as a radiologist to help a friend out in Michigan. And that brought me to the book. And once I looked at my dad's autobiography again, I was looking at it in between reading cases as a radiologist. And then between cases, my left screen was my dad's autobiography. The right screen was my dictation in the biography. And it was so well written. The stories were told as though they'd happened the previous day. Clear. You could smell the smells. You could feel the fear. The way the dinner table was set, the details. And I thought, and plus the miracles, of course, the escapes. And I thought, I cannot leave this on a computer. I can't leave this on a disc. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, that I have a complete change in vector and mission and charge from being a doctor and which I just retired from, by the way, after 35 years, to being somebody who's an advocate for realizing what the Holocaust was and fighting anti-Semitism and racism and hatred in general. So that's my new charge, and that's how I look at life now. That it's a gift here in the United States. We have it. You may or may not like our government, but we have it pretty good here. I know you're in a different country. I know Europe has had many issues with anti-Semitism. The U.S., Canada, Australia, and the book actually ends up in your country as well, which is cool. But we have it in the free world. We have it pretty good, and we shouldn't take that for granted, because what happened to my father could happen to any one of us. And all these messages went through me, not to mention determination, integrity, resilience, and then on and on and on. So that's where I'm at now. Is the realization of what the dark world is like, and how good we have it in the free world. And I hope it stays that way.
That's a big topic, is how we get over all these false ideas about people because of a certain background or their family or whatever else. So yeah, how do you advocate for open-mindedness, for peace, and so on? How do you do that?
Well, first I wrote the book, and then we've got it out. And I'm very busy. I've done 76. This is my 77th podcast. I've done 20 TV and radio interviews. I've done 35 book events, book presentations, 2 at the United States Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., which is the pinnacle of what we do, a true honor. We did a book presentation at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. I was supposed to do Houston, but for various reasons that was postponed. Hopefully we'll get that back. I've got Long Island, the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. That's coming up in March, so I'll be doing a book presentation there. My first university is really exciting. That's in May. That's University of South Carolina. And ultimately, I do want the book to be taught in the classroom because education is an important part of fighting hate. And I can't do it by myself. So this is why I'm doing all these podcasts and interviews to help recruit people into the right kind of mindset. Now, most people would agree with me normally, but take that extra step. Help me get more talks. Maybe buy a book and do a good review. A book presentation, that kind of thing. Exactly what you're doing, inviting me for podcasts, which I appreciate. So that's my little corner of fighting anti-Semitism. It's not much now, but hopefully over time the ball keeps rolling, and hopefully we keep selling books even after I'm long since buried from beautiful Mother Earth. Hopefully the book keeps selling.
There's the grace of books and things like I'm doing here that they can be there after the body has no function anymore. Yeah. So this topic of anti-Semitism and in general prejudice and so on is a really big one. It's not just anti-Semitism that's important, but all types of prejudice. So do you embed your message with other prejudices to overcoming other prejudices, or is it really focused mainly on anti-Semitism?
Well, I think they go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other. I mean, I was raised in a high school that was 40% African American, and I was one of 3 Jews in my high school of maybe 2 or 3,000 kids. But I never felt anti-Semitism as a kid. It was always we would leave it on the football field. We would trash talk and kid around with each other, and I can't even repeat some of the things we used to say back in 7th, 8th, ninth grade, all the way through the end of high school. But we left it on the field. There was nothing. There were no protests. There were no fights because you were Jewish. Or I mean, I got picked on a few times, 7th grade and ninth grade, because I was just a small, dumb kid, who didn't know you get in the wrong hallway and you get beaten up or whatever. But it wasn't because I was Jewish. It was just because people could do it. And I was more privileged than some in my upbringing. So some of that might have been different. Some people were less fortunate than I was in their upbringing. But no, we talk about Islamophobia. I think that after 9/11, Islamophobia was rampant, and they were attacking Islamic people, Muslims indiscriminately. I mean, most people are peaceful. I've got a lot of Muslim friends too, by the way, and not realizing that these were terrorists and people that are denying 9/11. That's the time I'm talking about, obviously. They're denying the Holocaust too, but 9/11, I may remind people, was an attack against Americans, not just there was Christians that died, Jewish people, Asians, black, white, whatever. New York City, the Pennsylvania Pentagon, people on the planes, plus the collateral damage. So that was not a race. That was not a race specific attack. That was an attack against our country, of course. So, and then of course, it was ridiculous after the coronavirus pandemic. That the Asians were targeted, and that's ridiculous. It's just so there's a word called accountability that people need to read up and educate themselves on what people are really like. And so no, it's not specific just to anti-Semitism. It just happens to be my corner of discussing it because of what I inherited from my mom and dad's stories. So
Maybe you'd like to share some of the miracles you spoke of and some of the insights you gained by having this family heritage and being able to work with that and share about it and help people to see things in a different way, in a way that is more peaceful.
okay, so we'll start with his 4 escapes. His first escape was from the middle of the Carpathian Mountains in Hungary. He was in a forced labor camp with many other young Jewish and some not Jewish men in the forced labor camp out in the middle of nowhere. They were starving. They were they were beaten, they were urinated on, they were shot at by Russian planes that happened to just randomly, and none of them were armed. They all had the ridiculous hats and these yellow yellow bands that they had to wear on their arms, just like the other Jewish people had to wear the yellow stars, of course. So he escaped with his friend Frank after surviving a foot infection and food poisoning and many other issues. They had lice. He almost froze to death once because he had to dive into a river to recover his pail, his metal crappy rusted pail, because they would have beaten him for that. So that was in the middle of the winter. So lucky he survived all of that. His second escape, and that first escape is, man, like that's the one thing about the book I remembered over 30 years was his first escape, and you just have to read it to believe it. So very lucky. He and his friend Frank, everything about that escape was miraculous. They even had a third guy following them when they tried to escape in the middle of the mountains. The guy got caught and beaten, and they could hear it, and it's a scary. You feel the fear. You put yourself in my dad's place when you read about that. Their second escape, they made it to Budapest, and they were just they're looking for food and shelter and scrounging around, and this guy gives them a ride, and he double crosses them, and he takes them to what they call the dog pound in Budapest. So they're forced labor prisoners again, and they soon escape from that place, and that's another split-second timing, a lot of luck, a lot of courage, a lot of brains. A pack of cigarettes actually saved their life and saved them so that they could escape. Hard to believe, but that's the tool they used. But very lucky on that one. His third one was he was a medical student, and he was going to escape to Austria, and made it to the border. Ends up arguing with an armed Russian soldier and wins that argument. Convinces him that he was supposed to go fix X-ray equipment, ironically, in Austria, and he's bluffing his way through it. He says, "If you want to call the hospital, call the administrator, see if it's true." And the guy didn't do it, and so he vehemently stated his case and said that he needed to be in Austria. So they were going to let him go, and he made it. But he got so nervous about the fear of retribution that he turned around and went back to his medical school. He was in medical school at the time, and he was on call the next night, and nobody even knew that he was gone. So he could have ended up in Austria then, and this was before he was with my mom. And finally, he escaped. His fourth escape was with my mom in 1956, communist Hungary. The Hungarian Revolution had just ended. Mom and Dad were front runners. They'd had enough. 2 wars. The communists did not treat Jews much better than the Nazis did, save for corralling them in corners of cities and corralling them into trains to take them to their death camps. So, but there was plenty of torture. There were plenty of cloak and dagger stories in the book about the communists too. So it's very inspiring. My dad's integrity is, you can see that throughout the book, throughout the stories. His determination that I've already mentioned before, and just wanting to be free. He just wanted to practice medicine and do it in a free country, and it's so inspiring that it just helped motivate my cause, and that's what I'm trying to share. So great stuff. What other miracles? The way he got into medical school was a miracle. The way he found out about what happened to his parents, who perished at Auschwitz while he was gone at the forced labor camp. 50 years old. The grandparents had never met. My mom's grandfather was a rabbi, and he also perished at Auschwitz. Real threats to society. My dad's father was a dentist, and he gave freebies to the less privileged in my dad's hometown. And my dad's mom was very nice to people, the less fortunate. Shared food, shared conversation. So they were a big part of the hometown. But they had issues in their hometown too. They had to move back and forth. Orthodox, the community, they didn't fit in there. The Christian community, they didn't really fit in there. So, and my dad growing up kind of had the same thing. So, but the redemption part of it is Dad delivered 10,000 babies in the Detroit area after he came to the United States and redid his residency. That's a partial redemption. Of course, it doesn't bring back part of his family, but it certainly is something to see that he brings back life after all that he'd been through. And there's more miracles than that even too. It's every chapter. It's a 40-chapter book, and every chapter has its own story, and it could be a miniseries. And each story has miracles in it, and some more than one. Their hiding places were unbelievable. The clothes they had to wear, anything to survive.
Yeah, that is really amazing to get through so many different places where you were kept captive and then get out of there, survive, and then still have this kindness in one's heart and help people and act. I think that's one of the most amazing things about these people who survived these types of situations, that many of them are able to go beyond bitterness and go towards kindness and stay kind. I'm really, really, really touched by these people who actually choose to stay kind and believe in people, because they could live their lives in fear, right?
It's a great point, and I love bringing that up too. So he never had PTSD. I mean, you never know by his demeanor: jolly, jovial, smiling, loved to go to work every day. Of course, he had arguments with my mom. He had arguments with me, but in general, everybody loved him. And yeah, you would never know what he went through. Not everybody has that. Some people really get severe PTSD. We talk about it from Vietnam vets. Some people don't want to share their Holocaust stories. Some people bury them with themselves. They don't share. Some do. I took it a step further by being fortunate enough to have a book published about it, and so did quite a few other authors from Amsterdam Publishers, who's a wonderful publishing house, and that's all they do is Holocaust related, with all our little quirks in the books. One is about music, this one's about food, one's about dancing, one is about Auschwitz. In my case, Hungary, which is little known history. You might know more about Hungarian history than me because you're in Austria, but Hungarian history plus not only Nazi Hungary, but also communist Hungary. So there's that twist, and yeah, the kindness, it's amazing. He could have been bitter. He could have gone to the bottle and drugs and whatever else, and they were smart, sober, intelligent, well-rounded, educated people who like to share stories about the Holocaust and history, but they also museums and fine arts and opera and theater, travel, education, sports and music. Even not so much sports. My mom, yeah, but my dad not so much. But music, they were so well rounded. So I think that took their mind off of things. Plus my dad's work and my mom educating people about the Holocaust, and both of them integrating well into not only the medical community but also the Jewish community and the community in general. So it was part of the conversation often. I didn't really buy into it much the first half of my life. And if you knew me 6, 7 years ago, you'd say this guy would never write a book about the Holocaust because I got saturated and I got tired of it and this and that. But everybody else was fascinated hearing about the stories, and it's good. So now I got the bug, I got the bite. Both my parents are gone, and this is my charge now: is just to continue the fight against, especially now. I mean, they wrote the story in the 70s, and we're talking about the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. So we're talking almost 100 years ago, and here we are again with what's going on in the world, and it's so ridiculous. So they wrote the stories as though they knew I would rewrite them. God bless them, and also they and don't you hate it when your parents are right? I like to joke about that. They actually knew that I was going to do this, and I did, and I couldn't help myself. It was just I was compelled to do it. So yeah, the kindness and he wasn't the only one. My parents had a lot of good friends in Michigan, throughout the country, throughout the world. They weren't just Jewish; they had a lot of Jewish friends, but Christian friends, Muslim, Hindu, African from continental Africa. They we could take a page off how they wanted to meet more people from more walks of life and learn about their culture and their background. He brings up the part two of the book, if we ever do it. He brings up when they went to Hong Kong and there was a refugee, an immigrant from mainland China, and they compared notes about what the communists did to the people. And it's amazing that, and this is another thing, how many ways man can hurt other men with torture, with finance, with disrupting family, with disrupting lives. People find more and more ways to do it over the last 100 years, 1,000 years, and it's ridiculous. Why can't people learn to do things that are acts of kindness, give back to the community, which in a way I guess I'm doing, and my parents both did too. They gave a lot of charity back, tzedakah, we say in Hebrew, tzedakah, charity. They even had a priest help them escape the final escape from Hungary to Austria, and that was a harrowing escape. But what my mom and dad did once they got to the United States is they sent the priest's parish an annual stipend, an annual gift, which I think was fantastic. And the border guards, they had to bribe the border guards with a couple bottles of rum when they got there to Austria. They took the rum and they could have killed them anyway. And And then the guards, when they got drunk, were talking anti-Semitic remarks, and so was the guy that helped them get through the farms and the wasteland to get from Hungary to Austria. The vigilante, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Um, the renegade, that's the word I'm looking for. But even while he was talking about the Jews and this and that, and my dad gets a haircut, and the guy's all anti-Semitic there, they had to tolerate it, not just getting beaten or killed. It was just that kind of abuse, the verbal abuse that they had to put up with. And if there's the learned helplessness thing that if you hear that you're no good long enough, you start to believe it. So I guess my dad and mom were stronger than that. They overcompensated, saying we're better than that, and they were right. They sure were.
Yeah, this is really, really powerful. This message of hope and trust and I think that drive to give to the community and do exactly the opposite of what they were getting when they were persecuted, right? It's the opposite, right? If you're persecuted, that's awful. But when you're giving to the community, that's the opposite. So that's what what these people should have been doing, right? Let's say, but they were doing the opposite. They were persecuting people instead. Yeah, my family also has history with the war and having escaped many times. My grandparents went through all of that, and my mother was part of it. So yeah, I'm very, very thankful that you're sharing this message and that you're able to talk about it. I don't know if you had any touch with it or not. Probably, maybe you didn't. You probably were the generation that didn't have to go through it anymore. But it's really, really amazing to see, like you said, that one still does it. People are still persecuting each other. They're still treating each other badly and finding new ways of being mean and harmful. And like you said, if you're told too often that you're worthless, at some point you might start believing it. And that's a danger. That's a real danger. So yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing to hear how your parents decided to believe in themselves despite all the attacks that they had to go through and all the, like you were saying, the people were using these attacks to look like they were part of the community and still were helping them, which is also a fascinating oxymoron in the way things were going on in that time and probably still happens in our day.
Well, in America, I've been watching a lot of sports. It's a big sports time here, and there's a lot of great commercials that are sponsored by these multi-billion-dollar businesses about how kids are worth something. It's a new commercial that I've seen. How kids are worth something because it still happens. I mean, it's not just people persecuted, but people that grow up in the ghettos, fatherless, or beaten up by their parents, or whatever the case may be, verbally abused. That's definitely another form of learned helplessness. African Americans, Jews, whatever it is. And then, of course, these wars going on. Thank God there's a ceasefire now in Israel and a hostage exchange. So hopefully, but I can't imagine. So as a radiologist, I can't imagine. I was trained. I love anatomy and the cell and the way biology is, and not just with humans. How giraffes are designed, or dogs, or any kind of life, or the way it's put together. It's just a beautiful thing, and people can take that away in just a second with one bullet, or one saber, or hanging somebody. They could just, there's no respect for life, and I can't imagine that anyway. So um, maybe the world's overcrowded. Maybe poverty plays into it. I'm sure I would never want to live in Gaza. I wouldn't want to live in North Korea. These poor people, they're squelched. They're quieted. They're not allowed to say anything. So when there's weakness, then the bad guys take over. The dark world takes over. Iran, North Korea, Russia. Russia hasn't changed much. They're still aggressive, like they were back in the 50s. They were our friends, supposedly, in World War II, but as soon as that war ended, or soon after, it became the Cold War, and things just went downhill for Hungary. And I feel bad for the Hungarians, too. They never got a break. Like Vienna, I mean, and Austria got a break. They were free from the get-go once the war was over, but not Hungary. They got the wrong. So that's another thing. If the United States had rescued Hungary rather than the Soviets, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I probably would have grown up in Hungary, and if I was lucky enough to get into medical school in Hungary, that would have been the case, and I never would have gone to the United States. My parents loved Mother Hungary. They just hated Nazi Hungary, Communist Hungary. They wouldn't buy into it. And they were smart enough to not talk on the phone about it or not talk to their colleagues, the ones that did, the ones that were turncoats, because they got points for trying, for finding the rats, for finding the ones that weren't fine, for finding the anti-communists and turning them in. So my parents were too smart for that too. They wouldn't buy into it. So lucky for them. I mean, it's nice to be smart and nice to have courage. And by the time my dad's fourth escape, by the way, he missed an escape. That's another miracle. He missed an escape. He felt like he was the unluckiest guy in the world. And come to find out that he went to the wrong train station. And everybody who made the train, that made the right train station to escape, and this is under communist Hungary, they got arrested, including my dad's medical school roommate. So I don't know if you know The Sopranos, but the luck on this guy. I mean, we talk about the luck of the Irish, the luck of the Jewish, but I'm going to just say I think it's all in the hand of God that my dad was lucky enough to. And what the original book, one of the original book titles after the Hungarian Papillon, the Hungarian Butterfly, is what I originally wanted to call it the book. The other one was the Sixth Book of Moses, because my dad's Hebrew name is Moses or Moshe, and Moshe ben Yosef, Moses son of Joseph, rest in peace, both. But yeah, the Sixth Book of Moses, because of all the miracles, and it's kind of facetious, but Not a Real Enemy was picked up by my co-author, and I think it's an excellent title and appropriate.
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic also, that people do not always, often fleeing from a certain system is not because one doesn't like the country where one is at. So it's really important to speak about how we think about each other, how we even speaking about countries. We know that there's many people who are just common people in these countries, right? And so it's really, you can't really say a country is bad or this or that, but one can certainly see certain systems that are really harsh and difficult to deal with and are not really supporting our human lives in a way that we can feel happy with. But I certainly don't know what it's like for those people. So I can only imagine. And I do know from my family history that things can get really, really dark and difficult, and one has to. And getting through that is really wow. And so I kudos to your parents as well for having moved through that.
Well, thank you. And you're right. You're right. I mean, I shouldn't generalize about the people in these countries. I'm just mostly talking about the leadership. Iran, not that long ago, was almost they had a young population. They were on the move to being more conservative and more integrated. And whatever happened there, the leadership changed. North Korea has been the same for as long as I can remember, even before I was born. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of people in Iran don't like what they have in North Korea and whatever, but they can't say anything about it, so they're trapped. Anybody who comes to the United States that I meet here, and and if I can understand them, and they're happy to be in the U.S. and they tell me their story, I like these people. I mean, there's no reason not to. So, and I'm hoping that what's happening in Syria and Lebanon changed the people's mind. I'm glad they ousted Assad. I think it was Assad, and the people are celebrating, and the same thing happened in Iraq. But they dare not speak up or say anything at the time of the bad leadership, at the time of the dark leadership. So we can see how people. It's like a big springboard. It's all wound up and just ready to release when the leadership changes. So, and I hope that happens in Iran soon. I hope Putin stops the war, whether they like Trump or not. Hopefully, he helps that happen, and we'll see what happens. And then the Israel war stopping is good. Hopefully, more peace in the Middle East. There's always going to be malcontents. There's always going to be troublemakers. We know that. But in general, let's pray for peace and not just in the Middle East and Ukraine, but God forbid the Ukraine war extends further into Europe, and now people are now going to be turning their heads. And just like in World War II, we don't need a World War III, and it looked like we were heading there. But at least at least the Israel conflict has died down a little bit, and I will hope it stays that way for sure too. So
It's a big topic that there's always wars going on, almost always. I don't think there's any time in history where there wasn't a war going on, but I may be wrong about that. And yes, we have it in our domestic homes as well, all these conflicts and things, and in our jobs and wherever. There's always things where we have to deal with the interhuman interfaces that are not always on the same page or very often can get into conflict. So it's really, really important that we talk about it, that we let each other know that there is another way, and we can learn from the mistakes that we make, right? And we may even be willing to learn from the things that happened in the past, which would be great, right? Like from the history of your parents and other people who went through all kinds of things and chose to continue being kind and chose to continue to help each other. I mean, we have psychologists like Viktor Frankl, who tells his story, and there's others who all tell their stories, and it's amazing how much they've contributed to our lives and our way of seeing the world. Yeah, and I think the topic of how valuable we are is also very important. That everyone is infinitely valuable in the mind of God, as it says in the Course in Miracles, and you were also speaking of that. So I think that's all these topics are really important. And yes, please end wars and end suppression and attack on each other in whatever forms they come.
amen to that. So it's tough to sell books. It's tough. It's a very tough business. Marketing the book, selling, getting the story out there. I'd love to get the book in Israel and Hungary, and now since I'm meeting more people from Europe, it'd be great in England and France and even Austria, of course, as the book ends. The story ends in Austria, at least part one. And I mean, that's enough. There's plenty of stories. And then, of course, I have to find my publisher has to find a publisher that's interested in that country, and then you got to get distribution. For now, I'm focused on the United States, but it would be wonderful. I know some of the Amsterdam publishers, authors that are bilingual or come from or first generation, but maybe they come from a different country. Some went to South America, so their book is in English and Spanish and distributed in several countries. I'm hoping that that's the case someday too, not just the United States. But the United States is a big market. I've got to protect my own area, my own home around me, but I hope the word spreads. We're querying producers, right? We're querying producers through a screenwriter. It's kind of a long shot, but it'd be great to get my dad's story somehow on film, whether it's a miniseries or a movie, a documentary. I would be elated because that would bring people back to the book and the story, especially if it's well done. There's a movie coming out with Adrian Brody called The Brutalist, and I guess he's a Hungarian refugee and he ends up in New York. I don't know much about it. It sounds like it's going to be a real winner. I can't wait to see it, and I hope it opens people's eyes up to countries like Hungary, where the history is relatively unknown. And even by myself, I mean, until I'd worked on this project, starting 6-7 years ago, I didn't know much about it. So I wanted to share. There are about 825,000 Hungarians before World War II, and at least 550,000 passed away. So, and my dad was lucky to live too, because they had death marches in Europe for these forced labors, like they did in the Far East, and I didn't know that. Not a lot of people didn't. And my dad and his friend Frank's first escape was in fear of being on a death march, and also getting that the war was almost over. They didn't know whether it was safer to be in Hungary or Austria, because depending on who won the war, whether it was Russia, United States, or the Axis, the evil Axis. So very scary stuff. When you run away, you don't know where you're running to, and you don't know where your next meal is coming from. You don't know where your shelter is. You don't have a job. You can't go to your hometown because the war's still going on there. And so you're really up against all odds, and they managed to do it, and it's very inspiring. But hopefully someday in foreign countries, the book, like I said, and classrooms, and I'm so grateful to have this University of South Carolina coming up in May. It's really an honor, and hopefully more to come.
So how do you connect with the you have the now you've become an advocating the issue the anti-Semitism and all these things to go against that, right, to end it. And you were a doctor so long, right? So I think that there's a connection there. I mean, your father was a doctor too, so there must be a how this willingness to help people in health issues, and now help them with issues of the mind, right? Because of the way they see things and how they act and so on. So that, I think that's a continuation of that willingness to serve.
Absolutely. I couldn't say that better myself. I'm sure there's doctors that are racist or prejudiced or whatever. It doesn't fit in my profession. It really doesn't. A patient is a patient. They don't want to be there. I've been a patient recently too. As I'm getting older, I don't want to be there. They don't want to be there. So treat them fairly, treat them kindly, and be reasonable with people. And you don't have to be a doctor to do that. You could work at the Social Security office. You could be a bartender. You could be you could work at Disney. Whatever you want. Pick your poison. But it's people want to be people want to go to a restaurant and eat out. They want to feel special. That's I kind of look at it. You look around and everybody's happy and proud. They don't have to do the dishes. They have a few extra shekels, a few extra Hungarian forints to go out for a meal or take a vacation. That's what it's all about. Family, yes, kindness, not hatred. And I mean, my little corner is just trying to sell that to try to sell that concept in my own little way. I can't fight anti-Semitism alone. I need to recruit a lot of people. I'm going to continue to do this as long as people are listening and reading the book and sharing it. I hope that the book is available in Austria through Amazon. If it's not, it is available on Barnes and Noble and Walmart and my alma mater, Tufts University, and at all the Holocaust museums I've already mentioned, plus the one in Michigan, my home state. So slowly but surely, we're getting the book circulated, and eventually maybe foreign countries, which I already said. But that's just kind of my charge now. And I agree with you. The mind is as important as any other part of the human body, maybe the most important. If you don't have a good mind, you don't have a good heart. Well, it's not going to go well for you. So, and if you don't have a good family too, I mean, I feel badly for people that are raised in families that were very dysfunctional. All families have dysfunction in them, but there's extreme and there's a continuum of the extremity of the and fortunately I was on the right end of that. So I love my parents. I still do. It's a very emotional thing, just thinking about them every day, talking about them. It's very hard. It's the least I could do to pay them back for everything they've done for me. It keeps the family legacy going, and we keep our family history going. And I wish more people would do that, but it's very hard. It's a difficult business, and it's a lot of work, a lot of dedication. But it's a labor of love for me, and I'll say that until I die, or I can't do this anymore. So I'm just happy to be here and participate here, and a really busy year so far, and hopefully it stays that way. Talking about this.
By the way, you're not the first doctor on the podcast. There's been a few. And they also have their messages to give. So it's beautiful. So, yeah. So how do you feel about this healing process of going beyond this idea of needing to attack or needing to be better or less than each other, right? That are part of this whole debate and this whole topic, because where does it come from? You think someone has something that you need, or you think you're not good enough, or you think you're better than or the others, or you think you're less. All these things, we're not valuing the human being or living beings as they need to be valued, right? If we're always judging and attacking.
Yeah, I think some of it's insecurity. I already mentioned earlier, poverty might play into it quite a bit. Upbringing, um, I, everything is multifactorial. There's no doubt about it. The complexity of the cell, the complexity of the body, the complexity of the financial systems, all of that. So, for a person to hate some of these people you're never going to change, but the idea is to, again, recruit the ones that the 99 percenters that agree with me, and just realize don't be passive in times of hate, in times of criminal action. These protests have become violent. Get involved with not just my book and my story and these podcasts. Get involved with the politicians in the area, whether it's a local mayor or I'm going to an event tonight. It's International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and there's an event tonight in my hometown here, and I plan on going. I'm not a speaker or one of the guests, but I plan on networking and meeting people there, and I'm glad they're doing this kind of event today, and many more of them. And I hope I do more talks here in Florida, where I live now. I've done quite a few, plus a couple live TV, in studio TV interviews. So they've been receptive to it. And this was all before the October 7th attacks. So, and I was in Israel almost to the day, a year before, visiting there, and I never felt safer. So the people, there was a lot of love in Israel back then. And the Muslims and the Jewish people integrated very well, and the few Christians there too. And the sites we had a pre-planned program. It was Tufts alumni. Most of the people on my tour were Christian. There were a few Jewish people, and we had Muslims too. We had a Muslim professor. They're all super people, and they were all interested in learning about the Holy Land. And that's just one spot too. My interest in Hungary was never there. I mean, we went when I was a junior in high school, but I didn't really show much interest. It was under communist Hungary. The people seemed very unhappy. And I remember my dad crying when he was in his home in his hometown in Jura, and he went back to the apartment and they let us in, and he looked down the view out the window and he broke down crying. And it was one of the few times I saw my dad cry, but I remember that. And the grave sites that they would go visit, it was boring for a high school kid. But later on, the images come back to me now, even many years later. So, and I understand why they felt that way. And then we took a hydrofoil, and I guess it was on the Danube, to Vienna, and spent the last couple of days of the vacation in Vienna. And the people, it was so different. They were lively and they were happy and free. The food was great. I mean, I remember that vividly, and I still bring that up from time to time. That and Wolf, my last name is I think it's a top 10 in Austria, if I remember right. There was Wolf Jewelers and this and that. It's like Smith and Jones here in the United States. Wolf is so somehow my parents adopted a German style name rather than Hungarian, but it's all good. I like the name Wolf. Wolves are they're loyal, they're faithful, they're about family, they're in packs. It's a great species, the wolf. So I'm proud to have that name.
Yeah, that reminds me of how my grandma reacted when she visited her once home in Germany. And then there were people there who were still saying anti-Semitic things, and she was really shocked. So yeah, it's really awful when you get that type of vibe when you come back to a place where you were and had lived and had your childhood or whatever, and then you have to realize, oh my God, there's still issues going on there. It's not swept. It's not over. Let's put it that way. It's not like the wind blew it away or anything. It's still there. And that's bitter.
Yeah, it's quite unacceptable. I mean, there's no room for all of that here in today's world. We're never going to survive as on our planet or as a species if this continues. I mean, there's just no way. We're heading for a collision course. So, in my viewpoint, I'm just trying to stop that in my own little way, and hopefully it makes a difference. I mean, a lot of people, when I get one compliment a week, that's all it takes for me, or one a day. Somebody who says, this book has changed my life or my way of thinking, or a great thing. When I was at the Holocaust Museum in D.C., two of these great, one used a great expression. One said to me, "Sorry for your loss, sorry for your losses," and these are people I didn't even know. I mean, not the people that I met at the museum, but you talk about losing family that I've never met. And and then other people said, "Thank you for your service." And I never really thought of it that way because it's just fun love. It's just fun to do, but it's about a serious topic. And I try to keep it light, but obviously the topic's heavy. But I try to keep these. I'm talking about the same thing every day, but hopefully with a little twist every time. And I appreciate you spending the time here with me too, especially from a country where the book ends, and that's really cool. So please help me spread the word, get people to read the book. There's people here that I'd love to read the book that have said anti-Semitic remarks. If they were arrested or if it was a criminal act, they should be forced to watch these movies and read these books. At least some of them, not necessarily just mine, but a lot of them, so that they can understand what they're talking about instead of just spouting off at the mouth and saying the wrong thing. So
Yeah, that's really important that we learn to change our minds about all of this and see it differently. Because even when your family has went through a lot, you still need to reflect on your own ways of doing things and where you are prejudiced and so on. And so it's an intense process. So I think you know that from having worked with the story of your parents and so on, how intense that is to change your mind about things that you thought you knew and thought were in a certain way, and then discover, oh yeah, wow, it's actually something totally different than I thought. So yeah, that's a big step, and I think it's an important one, and we all are facing these types of topics to where we need to change our minds, or where it would be good to change our minds about them. And many times we resist, so there's a lot of resistance, and sometimes it's a very emotional process. Like you were saying, it's a very emotional thing for you to speak about it, and it is, right? It's a really, really major historical issue that we're dealing with. And it's not, and even though it's a specific story, it's always a universal topic or a universal issue that humanity has. So it speaks to basically all stories of resilience and survival and moving forward in one's life. So yeah, I would like to also thank you for being here. Thank everyone who's watching or listening at whatever time you do. Please spread the word. Please review the podcast. And if you want to be a guest, please reach out to me. Or if you know someone who would be a good guest, please reach out to me or let them reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you all. And blessings to you all. Thank you.
thank you. Amen to that. God bless you. Thank you.